Hi, and welcome to Art Laughs. I'm Verity Babs, and today I spoke to Charlie Partridge. Charlie, please introduce yourself.
Hello, I'm Charlie Partridge. I call myself a comedian. I do lots of things, but I'm a comedian, I guess, is my favourite thing that I do. But I
Mm.
sort of make events as well, and immersive events and club nights, and write puzzles for a living.
And I feel like that all ties in with what you've picked, which I
Yeah.
still haven't got my head entirely around. But why don't you introduce it for us?
So I picked, well, you said we could pick anything, and I, I sort of thought of some pieces of art that were easier to recognise as a piece of art.
Yeah.
And then I actually wanted to pick something that made me feel. It doesn't necessarily. I can't necessarily describe what it made me feel, but something that made me feel sort of alive and excited. And I thought of the work of a sort of. I'm going to call them performance artists
Okay.
for this, but they're kind of like event producers called Hot Breath Karaoke, and they used to produce a lot of events in East London. And they've now moved back to Canada. But I picked specifically because you have to pick one event of theirs. I was going to pick their show where they did karaoke in some showers in a Lido in East London, but because I didn't actually go to that one, I decided to pick an event that I was working on the bar at, which was their 2011 kind of Eurovision special show. I think I've forgotten what it was called now.
They're
I
called
think
Foreign Tongues.
so. It's basically a club night entertainment show where Hot Breath Karaoke, which is a husband and wife kind of artistic double act, created their own version of Eurovision. And they had music videos for about a dozen artists. They produced songs and music for these made up artists that were played by various different performers. And then there was like a whole round of voting, and the whole show was presented as if you were like there live at a Eurovision style event with like sort of very kitsch hosts, and it was totally bonkers. They had a green screen booth off to one side, so when like judges were phoned in from other parts of the world, the other performers would go and get changed into different costumes in this booth, and it was this like just this like mad onslaught of ideas and production. And it was an amazing show. I was busy working the bar, so there were some bits of it I'm sure I missed, but I remember just thinking uh, I was in awe of it. So that's why I picked it.
It's interesting because looking online at the event page and they've got some of the music videos up and trying to decode what this must have been, because I wasn't even sure if it was a in-person event and these were subsidiary bits of content.
They produced like 12 music videos before
Mm.
the event that you could watch before the event as well and get a feel for these performers and who they were. And
And
then
they're
you watch the
mad.
event, and then they were all there, and they're all totally weird,
Yeah.
and so committed to that weirdness as well. Like I don't know, that event was in 2011, and I remember Mike from Hot Breath sort of talked about how he loved taking crap technology and pushing it to its limit. So he was using like quite rudimentary green screen, and this was 10 years ago, so would have been more rudimentary than the sort of stuff you get now to produce these kind of mad looking videos.
Yeah, the videos are like a fever dream esque, and it's interesting looking at them. And on this web page itself, which I guess you could kind of argue as that as a sort of artifact, internet artifacts are very interesting from times when not everyone necessarily had a website.
Yeah,
That this tech was all still relatively exciting and new and that kind of thing.
I haven't been on it for a while, but I remember it looked old, but also it was deliberately made to look kind of from another time even then. I just love that they've got uh, a very definitive style.
Mm. A massive part of what you do is this eclectic showmanship, the sort of events where you're getting everyone chanting together and costumes and all this design goes into it. Where is that kind of come from for you?
I think when I moved to London, so I went there ostensibly to try and do comedy, and then I ended up flyering and doing tech work for some cabaret nights.
Mm-hmm.
And I wasn't really aware of, I was sort of vaguely aware of, what cabaret was. But in London in about 2008, 2009, there was this kind of real scene that blossomed. And it was kind of funny because it's pre-Facebook and Instagram.
Mm.
There's a lot of it which isn't really saved anywhere anymore. So there was something called Club Whoopee, which was this immersive cabaret night where they'd take over like a swimming pool, and then there'd be all these different acts, some of which were dancing in the pool, and everyone would come incredibly dressed up. And the idea of all these events that I used to I didn't work on Club Whoopee, but I worked on something similar called The End of the World, where the audience came a bit like Secret Cinema, dressed up, part of this world that was being created. And all of the kind of fun of the event comes from inviting the audience to invest and play in this world. But it's not immersive in the way that, Punch Drunk or Secret Cinema or Yumi Bum Bum Trainers. The way in which you have to involve yourself is very light touch, and then there's all this other stuff going on.
You bring up an interesting point about this pre-Instagram time where stuff on the internet or events could be properly ephemeral, like they just happen now, and if you ever want to find remnants of it 10 years later, it's going to be really, really hard to find even a photo of it online, let alone having 100 posts. Or
it was kind of weird. I couldn't find pictures of this event, which is one of the things. And similar with their karaoke in the showers one, which I thought was that was an event in London Fields Lido, which had been derelict, and then it had this period of life in the 90s where it was like a kind of derelict rave venue, and then it was used for like art events in East London, and they wanted to do an event which referred to this, so but it's also now a place of fitness. So this karaoke event was you had to sing karaoke on a cross trainer or an exercise bike, and whoever burnt the most calories during their song won a prize at the end of this event. But people were just so invested in sort of cycling. I've seen them do it elsewhere. But what was I saying? I don't know. I just love mad stuff. I got Mike and Jen to do an online show for me during the pandemic. There was like hula hoopers and comedians and different acts. And then Mike came on, and Mike did some karaoke whilst downing a litre of chicken stock. And it was like one of the funniest and sort of most committed performances I've ever seen anyone do. I think it's just, he just his whole set looked brilliant. It was just I just really love them. And I love the fact that they don't compromise on what they want to do. And I think as a part of me, which is like not ashamed but frustrated that some of the work, because I do a lot of kind of corporate work, you do compromise on things that you'd want to do because you're making something for someone else's brief.
Hearing about it about this time where there seemed to be this real energy around like alternative culture, cabaret happening, do you think that cabaret now is vastly different to that point? Like, was there a peak and then it vanished, or is it not really vanished, but it feels a bit like when you hear about, times in the noughties where if you went to a certain club, you could hang out with both Amy Winehouse and people from the Libertines. Everyone was there together. There's a sense of it being a very sort of separate bubble from the rest of time.
I mean, I still work in cabaret a lot, and I love it. So it's, it is different. And also you see people who, I remember people doing stuff back then who now have had like huge West End shows, and you were seeing them in like a church hall in Islington or something. People were still taking photos of themselves, and I guess there wasn't as much of a sense of like, this needs to be Instagrammable.
Right.
But I don't necessarily think that that's a bad thing. I think there's something quite fun and joyful about people seeing themselves how, they like to be represented. And
you also, along with comedy, produce a lot of music. And has that been something kind of throughout your life, or was that similarly with the cabaret stuff? You turn up in London and and you hear music for the first time. And
I've never heard music. No, no. Weirdly, I think that has just come from. I didn't really care about music
Okay.
when I was even like a teenager. I used to just listen quite obsessively to quite specific comedians, and then moving to London, I ended up working in club nights, and then that you're doing like 6 hours of music 3 nights a week or whatever,
Mm.
and you're meeting people that have got a real passion, and having relationships with people that really care about specific bands or different people. So I didn't really start doing any music till I was 30. So it's quite nice to hear you say that I'm a music producer, because I've made one EP, but. It's important to remember for anyone that it's never too late to start something that you're interested in.
Mm.
So I think I'm really pleased that I do music stuff now, because I sort of wanted to do it but was afraid of doing it because everyone who I knew who did music was already brilliant, and
Right.
you got to put in like a couple of years of being shit, and then you start to find things and understand stuff. And I mean, yeah, it's going to sound really wanky, but I definitely feel like I can see stuff in music that I couldn't see before. It's like it's like developing a new sense. Anyone who's watching this who hasn't heard my music's not very good, I feel like I need to caveat. It's sort of deliberately amateurish, but even with that, there's fun stuff to see, and I just love dancing. And I think I'm also with music often trying to capture a feeling of being at a club, at a party, of that sort of freedom and abandon and love and joy and connection, and all those things that come with specific types of music. Yeah.
Has that been a big thing for you, like dancing and parties? Is that longer lived than your interest in music or interest in cabaret?
Yeah, I think when I was in my early 20s, I just started going to things, and there was a whole new world of. I think when I first went to them, I'd sort of was almost, I don't know, worried about being an outsider, or worried about not being able to fit in with these kind of like mad. The first time I went to like a massive club where there was loads of stuff going on, and you had to queue down an alleyway, and there was a weird door, and then there was all these rooms, and there was like samba bands in there. I was like, what is this place? It's insane. That specifically was a club called Shunt, which was not there anymore. It's under where the Shard is now. It was in all these tunnels under London Bridge railway station, and they've all been filled in as foundations for the Shard. But it was that was a kind of like experiment. Shunt were a theatre group, a bit like Punch Drunk,
Right.
but they had this like weird nightclub space under London Bridge, and I remember going there when I was about 19, and I'd just never seen anything like it. So it felt kind of like, what is this crazy foreign exotic place that is 30 miles from somewhere I'd lived for a while?
Where was original home?
Loughborough.
Midlands.
Midlands. Are you from the Midlands?
Northampton.
Things are going on everywhere, but it's harder to see sometimes when they're in a place where you grew up, because it's hard to divorce where you grew up. Sometimes, if you were frustrated with where you grew up, it's hard to divorce that place from that.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I grew up in very, very rural, and then coming to London was slightly boggling for me. I don't think I really ever got into the proper headspace of London. Whereas I always feel like anywhere I've lived, I think if I grew up here, I'd absolutely hate it. But I think that's just by nature of living there. But right now, I'm like, oh, this is lovely for me as an adult.
Do you live in Southampton, or do you live in like a small town outside?
Do live in Southampton now, which I really, really love. But friends of mine who grew up in Southampton, as you always do, think the town you grew up in is a bit of a shithole. But I guess that's just, is that a universal truth? Or do people who grew up in London love London because it's London?
I think there are people that grow up and love where they're from. So I live in Margate now, and there's definitely there's people that have moved there from outside, but there's also people that have grown up here and are sort of passionate about what the town's become, and but also what it was. And yeah, I don't know. I think that I think part of it comes from a kind of almost sort of shameful snobbery of when you grow up feeling a bit of an outsider.
Yeah.
You know, an easy place to protect your ego is to go, well, everyone here is just stupid, or, you know, whatever, or they don't get it.
Yeah.
But now my friends in this other town, they all totally get it. But
Mm.
really, you're probably just, you know, foolish and scared, and that's where a lot of problems lie. I don't know why I felt the need to end on some kind of like.
I love that.
A thought for the day.
I like when like the discussion about art very swiftly turns into slightly like therapy. That's the sweet spot we're aiming for. Art in you know, in a broader sense, but also fine art. Is that something that, you know, when I said you want to come on this and you want to pick a thing, was there like a reason to choose something so non-fine art?
Yeah, I just wanted to choose something that resonated with me. So, and I do struggle to find fine art that resonates with me as much as this did, and that's because I can look at a piece of fine art and appreciate it, and then get to know, you know, and find out about the place in the world where it's from and what was happening there and who was involved with it. But what I like about Hot Breath is that there's a way in which I almost can't see that outside view, because I know what it's like to be inside that scene and make work like that. The closest thing there was lots of other people doing exciting stuff around that part of town as well at that time, like, and people who are still making stuff. Like Hot Breath did a lot of stuff in the Bethnal Green Working Men's Club, which is a real East London institution. But at the time, other clubs that were doing stuff there were like 1927 Theatre Company and Yumi Bum Bum Train and Figs and Wigs, who've just had a big show at the Battersea Arts Centre, and you know, Sink the Pink, who've just got, you know, books out and been featured in lots of like photography magazines. And there was this incredible kind of like buzz to being the closest thing I mean, not to sound like arrogant, but it feels like being around during Bauhaus parties and poetry nights and stuff. Being involved in it. Yeah. I don't know much about that era, but their looks were pretty bonkers. Yeah. They putting on parties. I feel that's the kind of that's what resonated. Maybe with them. The fine art piece that I was going to pick was Coral Reef, which was at the Tate, Britain, in about 2011. That was an installation that you had to wander around as well. So there is still that idea of being involved, I guess. Yeah. Just 2011 was a great year for you. Yeah, it was a lot of fun. I mean, I've had a lot of good years. I've lived a charmed and privileged life. So. Well, Charlie, thank you so much for coming on Art Laughs today. Where can we follow you and hear what you're up to? Well, thank you so much for having me, Verity. It's been an absolute pleasure. My best place to follow me at the moment is probably Instagram, which is Charlie Partridge Comedy. Gorgeous. And anything you want to plug or you've got coming up? I'm sort of in a period of research and development at the moment, but I'll be doing more gigs this year. And then I have a regular online show, semi-regular, called Living Zoom Olympics, which is a kind of immersive online game show. Thanks so much for watching. You can follow Charlie in the ways written below. You can follow me, as per usual, at VerityBabsArt on Instagram, and I'll see you next time.